everybody. I miss you guys like crazy. Believe it or not, it's week 3 of online learning. I know it takes getting used to, but I just want to say you're doing a great job. I definitely would prefer being in the classroom, but I'm so grateful that we have a way that we can still get some teaching and some learning done, hopefully. What I want to do today, in a few minutes, just like 10 minutes or so, I want to go over Macbeth. Understanding the character map actually helps you understand the whole play. When we look at Macbeth, we're looking at all these characters, how they relate to one another, and we're looking at a whole lot of tragedy because Macbeth is, in case you did not know, this is good for your notes, Macbeth is a classic Shakespearean tragedy. Like we talked about, it has some comedy in it. So usually there is some romance in it, not so much in Macbeth. Macbeth is much more about violence, betrayal, holding grudges, revenge, of course, seeking the crown, guilt, hauntings, prophecies, all wrapping up in a whole lot of death and destruction, tragedy all the way around to the very last scene, okay? So let's take a look at what happens in Act 5 of Macbeth. Act 5 is so different because it happens so fast. In Act 5, it's a whole bunch of scenes. Some people write it down as 11 scenes in Act 5. In other places you look, they break it down to 8 scenes in Act 5 because the scenes are so short. They go by so quickly, and sometimes it's just one conversation. So taking a look at last week where you left off, and you should have put this in, let me go all the way back. We have Macbeth, who of course in the beginning kills Duncan because he's seeking after that prophecy of becoming king of Scotland. He becomes the king. He kills Duncan himself. He also kills his guards. Then we have Donald Blaine and Malcolm, who took off running because they initially were blamed for their father's death, okay? Also, when that transpires, Macbeth sends assassins to kill Banquo because he was also threatened by the fact that the witches said Banquo his sons would become king. So Banquo is in effect killed as well, but Fleance gets away. We'll talk about Fleance at the very end of the play. What else? Of course, Lady Macbeth was involved in the initial plan. She had the plot to kill the king, so you should have that on your map. She was a part of that. She didn't feel guilty about it. Macbeth did. Matter of fact, Macbeth still felt guilty after he had Banquo killed, his former BFF. He felt guilty. Remember, he was seeing the ghost at the table. It was really bad. But what's really different about Act 5 is that in Act 5, Macbeth starts to get more hardened, more like Lady Macbeth, very hardened in his quest, because he gets nervous about Macduff. He's heard rumors that Macduff doesn't agree with the way he's being king, that he believes that Macbeth is involved in having killed King Duncan. He suspected correctly. And so Macbeth actually he sends assassins to kill Macduff and his family. They actually end up killing Lady Macduff and her son. Macduff was not there when that took place, okay? So you should have this on your map too, that Lady Macduff and her son is that Macduff is now seriously angry. He already had his suspicions about Macbeth. Now he knows that it was Macbeth who had his family murdered in cold blood. So Macduff becomes allies with Siward, who's the king, one of the thanes or one of the royalty in England. This is Scotland, that's England. So Seward and young Seward, we're going to talk more about them later, but he allies with them. And of course, his biggest allies are Malcolm, the son that is back in action talking with them. Donald Blaine, we don't know what happened to Donald Blaine. He didn't really pop up again. But Malcolm has spoken with Ross and Lennox and Angus. There's a whole bunch of thanes of Scotland. The thanes, Macduff, Malcolm, and even some English folks, they all get together. Siward helps with his armies. They get together to overthrow Macbeth, who's being a terrible king and who they suspect of having killed Duncan, rightfully so. In the midst of all that, you see in Act 5 that Macbeth goes back to speak with the witches, and the witches give additional prophecies. One of them said that the Birnam Wood would move to another location, and it looks really confusing, but then you see in the next scenes that prophecy was coming true, because when these people moved together to come against Macbeth, they traveled towards Macbeth and they took some wood from burning wood, and they put them on themselves like to hide, like camouflage. So in effect, the prophecy was coming true. The witches' prophecies are really interesting because they come true, but not the way you think they're going to come true. And so Macbeth starts to see that. So Macbeth, meanwhile, before I jump to the final battle scenes, meanwhile, you also read last week that Lady Macbeth starts acting totally different. I read you one of her scenes. This gentlewoman who's supposed to be taking care of Lady Macbeth, but not so much, calls the doctor and is like, she gone crazy. I don't know what's going on with her. She's talking to herself and she's talking about bloodstains. And the doctor is not good for much. I don't think he's a psychiatrist. He's actually a physician. He's a body doctor, not a brain doctor. So he just kind of observes her lunacy. And so from their vantage point is how we see that Lady Macbeth has lost her mind, okay? So now she's the guilty one. She's the one that feels terrible about Duncan and Banquo. Guilt has gotten her. But Macbeth is the opposite. Macbeth has really switched roles with Lady Macbeth, and he's all about keeping, because now he's already the king, but he wants to keep his crown. So the witches tell him about burning wood. So one of the things that the witches say that Macbeth loves is that they say, you cannot be harmed by any man born of woman. That's the big deal clincher prophecy that makes Macbeth feel like, nobody can kill me because everyone's born of woman, right? So he feels invincible with the prophecies. So he's in the battlefield. All these people have come against him. And even so, in that moment, he feels very confident because he knows that none of those people can kill him. As a matter of fact, he faces young Seward in the battlefield, and you'll see that recap this week. Young Seward is the son of Seward from the royalty from England, and they go to battle one another, and Macbeth says, I'm not worried, etc. And so they fight. So he fights and he kills young Seward. So here's another arrow. Macbeth kills young Seward in battle, okay? So you have the ally dashes, you have the friend dash, you have the ally dashes, and then you have the arrow from Macbeth killing young Seward in battle. The Thanes are still here. Macduff, he's the one that wants revenge because his family has been killed. Macduff meets Macbeth on the battlefield towards the end of the play. And it's really interesting because I want to read you a little bit from this is scene 8. Remember that prophecy that Macbeth has. He feels confident, right? Even though he saw that burning wood didn't move, and that's coming true too. He's not worried about it because of the prophecy. He says to Macduff, I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born. He says that to Macduff, Macduff, you're gonna die. I'm not losing this battle because I can't be killed by anyone. And Macduff says, despair thy charm, and let the angel whom thou still serve tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Okay, what does that mean? So what that means is Macduff is telling Macbeth, well, your prophecy is saying whatever, you think you lead a charmed life, you can't be killed by anybody born of woman? I wasn't born of woman. I was taken out. I was ripped from my mother's womb. In other words, Macduff is a product of a C-section rather than a natural birth. Okay, is that a way to circumvent the prophecy? Absolutely so, because Macbeth at that point still says, you can tell me so. I'd rather be this better part of a man than to lay down. He doesn't go, I give up. He says, let's fight anyway. At that point, Macbeth has noticed that he's done a lot of things in the background, plotting and sending assassins, and he'd rather die a good death in this way by going into battle. And so Macduff kills Macbeth. The prophecy still comes true because he wasn't a man born of woman. Macbeth is killed, and then the play ends with Macduff actually bringing the head of Macbeth. Macduff bringing Macbeth's head on a stick into the room, and Seward finds out that his young Seward died, but he died a good death because he battled. Again, it's all about this, who dies a good death and who doesn't. Macbeth was ultimately a coward and a betrayer. He usurped for the crown is the last thing that. Who ends up being king? Malcolm ends up being king in the end, as Macduff brings the head, and Malcolm makes everybody, all the Thanes become earls, all the things that helped him overthrow Macbeth and kill him. That is how Macbeth ends, and so you do have a death face for Macbeth. Who killed him? Killed in battle by Macduff. So that gives you all the arrows, all the information about Macbeth. So I hope you enjoyed that. Interesting, especially how the prophecies ended up being the fuel to make everything happen, and the prophecies always came true even in a shady way. And that is Shakespeare's tragedy of Macbeth. All right, I'll see you next week on the Conference Call.